Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kat, and I spent quite a bit of time on the Cyborg Tinkerer and criticizing it in the past few weeks, so I think it's time to present some ways to fix it. Well, some of it. Obviously, I don't have all the answers. I consider myself a beginner writer. And yet, while reading it, I noticed quite a few things that I thought could easily have been improved, or they could have been pointed out by better readers, critique partners, editors. Some of them may have been pointed out and been ignored, I don't know. But let's try to fix what we can of the Cyborg Tinkerer by Meg LaTorre. I will try to keep the chaotic structure I have in my notebook to a minimum, but we'll see. I have 4 pages of notes for this, so let's start with the characters. When we meet Gwen, the book tells us that she is very standoffish, she doesn't like people, she doesn't want to be friends with anybody. But then later she just flips into, oh, these people are my family, I need to save them, and it comes out of nowhere because it doesn't fit what we've been told up to that point. So I would argue that you could actually do it the other way around. Gwen can care way too much and make friends too easily that she then has to keep at bay, at least in the very beginning, because she knows she's dying and she doesn't want to put this on anybody. Overall, she needs to be a lot less OP. Like, she fights like a freaking Terminator. That's just... no, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And in general, because she's an educated woman, I feel like she should be more intelligent throughout the whole book, but less good at other stuff. So Gwen starts out as an engineer or tinkerer, and then has to be a surgeon. That makes very little sense, even if she's doing no surgeries on cyborgs. I feel like she should have been hired as the ship engineer instead. The person before could have left. I mean, if the ship is going into space, they need constant maintenance. So she didn't really need to be a surgeon, which would then also help with her sneaking around the circus and wondering what the hell is going on and trying to figure out where performers are vanishing after the competition. I'll get to the competition in a minute. And overall, for her stance of needing to save all of the other cyborgs to make sense, she actually needs to spend more time with the performers. Because at best she hangs out with like 4 people, and only 2 of them, I would argue, have any connection to her really. So her whole, oh, they are my family, didn't make any sense anyway. So she needs to spend more time with the acrobats and performers to actually have those connections and justify this feeling. Similar for Aurora, she could be a lot more intelligent because her seduction plan and everything around it is just at absolute best teenage level. She talks a lot about her drive to be the best performer and to show what she can do in front of the Emperor or in front of an audience in general, but we hardly get to see any of it. I don't remember a single chapter where we're in her head and where she's actually performing. What we actually need is like at least a scene where you see how much she enjoys being in front of this audience and being the center of attention, to explain her drive and her willingness to go so far as chopping her own hand off to get a cyborg implant just so she can keep going with being an acrobat. Obviously, her over-the-top jealousy has to go as well, but I'll get to that when I talk about the relationship between those characters. Now, I think out of those 3, Bastion was actually the best character. He actually cared for people and it didn't come out of nowhere. And most of his actions kind of made sense. I mean, apart from the library, it's like, oh yeah, I'm reading my romance novel over here instead of being helpful. It's like, okay, dude, but you know, he cares about most of the performers, including the animals, because he's the only one who speaks up for saving the dragon when it passes out in front of the ship. So, What I don't get is why we don't have a POV chapter ever from Bastion's point of view. We only get Gwen and Aurora. But if he's the 3rd member of this relationship, why does he get no POV chapters? I feel like they should have been in there as well. And this would also work better. At some point he tells you that he didn't know what was going on with the competition either. So if he is out of the loop as well, then those three could actually work together to figure out what is going on, which would then also justify chapters from his point of view, because he can go places that maybe Gwen and Rora can't, since he's adjacent to the show management team. Now the competition. Because the mistress outright says your contracts will be terminated, I will take your implants back, and a lot of you will die in the process, either because those implants are vital to their survival, or because the surgeries are just like, it's really butchering people. So the stakes have to change here. It can still be lethal, but you can't tell all of the performers that. Like, you have hundreds, I think like 300 performers in the beginning. You tell these people, hey, you're gonna die if you don't do well enough. Then at the very least, after the first round of the competition, these people should come up with a plan to defend themselves, to get rid of the mistress, to flee. There should be something. Instead they all just truck along like, yeah, this is just a normal day in the office. It's like, sure, we get murdered left and right, but that's fine. It's like, what? Literally nobody comes up with a plan to do something about this. So at the very least, I think for this competition, the mistress doesn't tell people. They will be traveling from place to place, and then whoever doesn't do well enough in any of these competitions, and the rounds of the competitions have to be different as well. You can't outright kill people, or at least it would have to look like an accident, because otherwise you will have a rebellion at your hand before you get to anywhere as well. So they travel from place to place, and then she leaves people behind, and the others just think, okay, they are left in this town, and since there is virtually no communication anywhere between planets, as far as I can tell, that's fine too. So the others just think, okay, these performers haven't made the cut and they were left behind, when really they've been operated on and maybe sold off or just left for dead. Whichever, which is then the mystery that Rora, Gwen and Bastion can work on together. And mentioning mystery brings me to the title. The thing is called The Curious Case of the Cyborg Circus, which makes me think steampunk detective novel rather than sci-fi steampunk space opera. Which leads to the biggest bullet point in my notebook, the genre and world building. I think there were just too many genres meshed together. It wanted to be steampunk, even though it mostly put gears on stuff, and that doesn't make anything steampunk, but it wanted to be steampunk, it wanted to be sci-fi without the extensive world building and science that you need to make that work. It wanted to be romance, which, okay, it was romance in there, just not one I enjoyed. And then space opera, which now translates for me to soap opera in space. But yeah. I think a big part of the world building could have just been fixed by not putting it into space, because it didn't add anything. Since they had no communication between anything, virtually nothing that was digital, they could have just been steampunk ships sailing on the ocean. You can still leave people from the competition behind. If you can't talk to anybody, you won't find out. And you can put a lot more steampunk into it, because I'm not sure steampunk technology in space makes an awful lot of sense. But if you wanted to have zeppelins or faster ships or maybe the first submarine, that could work. Which also fits, because most of the description we get makes everything just sound like Earth. It's either medieval, industrial, or just very vaguely modern Earth. So if you don't want to build different worlds, then you might as well stay on Earth. And like I said, the whole space thing could have just been cut out, because the idea that a civilization has the option to go into space, but they haven't figured out fridges or freezers or plumbing on other planets, it just doesn't go together. And more to that, the fantasy element, which was literally just a dragon and calling the doctor a healer, they came out of nowhere. Once again, a civilization that is technologically so advanced that they have skimmers, spaceships, cyborgs, they should have a surgeon or doctor, not a healer. The dragon. Now the dragon can definitely make sense if you go into space and you go Star Trek. You have different planets, you have different species. You can make a dragon work somewhere in there. I mean, its biology will probably have to be quite different from the fantasy dragon we imagine, because let's be real, those only stay in the air because magic. And magic is not a thing in this world. So if you put other species in, then you can make a dragon work somehow as well. But then you also need to create other species. You can't have just human beings, cyborgs which are still human, and this one dragon. Problem is, if you cut the whole sci-fi element and you stay on Earth, then it would be kind of difficult to put a dragon in there if your world also doesn't have any magic or other fantasy creatures. So I was thinking, because the Emperor also has no real reason to hate cyborgs that we are aware of, Emmeline could give him one. She could be building cyborgs or machines like a dragon from the ground up and use that to get back at him for something else. There might have been other reasons why he killed her family or why she considers him responsible for their deaths. So if she builds the first submarine shaped like a dragon and goes around attacking the Emperor's ships, there's a reason for you to hate a specific kind of engineer or those machines. Which then again makes the actual cyborgs a bit more tricky, because if you have nothing digital, they can't have chips in their heads either. Programming a human brain is a massive undertaking, and steampunk does not give you the tools for that, I don't think. But they could still have cyborg implants to replace missing limbs and other things, and it could still give them superhuman strength, which then makes other people worry, what are these people up to, and will they use this superhuman strength against us? A quick note on consistency. Much like the world building, a lot more attention should have been paid here. For one, injuries. Gwen sustained very major injuries at points, and they never come back up again, or they hardly bother her. At least for things that matter to her. So if she's having sex, it's fine, but for everything else, I'm too hurt to put on trousers. It's like, what the heck, woman? For instance, her whole arm gets burned by the dragon, and it then never comes back up. It's like, have you ever sustained a burn? Because they freaking hurt, and not just for 5 minutes, not just until they've been treated. Same for the cyborg animals. They are there for the attack on the palace, and then they're never heard from again. Aside from the dragon, I don't think they took any of the other cyborg animals with them. And it's like, what the heck happened to those poor guys? The show management team falls into this category as well. They traipse around or after Emmeline to make her look more important, and then they never actually do anything, and they never get mentioned towards the end either. And then for the writing, all of those gratuitous sex scenes just have to go. Like where Gwen walks in on people, where the healer is ranking under the table in a public space for some reason, all of that has got to go. Nobody needs to read this. Which then brings me to the relationship between the characters. You want to make this a polyamorous relationship, which is fine. We need more diverse relationships in books. But I don't think it was well executed. Like the crazy jealousy of Rora, Bastion downright telling you he only wants his women to be with him. For Gwen it makes sense, yes, but for the other two it didn't. And then that just made me think, oh, okay, they are bending to Gwen's will, because to be with her they will compromise everything they want out of a relationship. And I'm just like, no, it's not great. Which also ties back to genre. Instead of making this a romance, I would have probably gone for the steampunk mystery, because then you can get your characters together sooner. Like they can work on the mystery of the competition and where all the performers going. And is this actually what's happening? Together, grow closer. And then these sex scenes that I think the author really wanted to write can actually happen between those characters, but all of them have to be on board. Like the discussion about the polyamorous relationship needs to happen sooner, and it actually needs to work for all of the characters. In relation to that, you can just cut most of the innuendos you get in there, like aside from the actual sex scenes, all of the innuendo can go as well, because just because you have that in there doesn't make it adult. And it also didn't add anything in most cases. Like all of those weird structures like hang on to your tits, it's like, no, or this, she described a whole lot of things with tits, and I'm just like, no, just cut it. Nobody needs that either. And the cursing. Just because you're cursing doesn't make this any more mature. So at least 80% of all of the fucks that you hear in this book can go. I don't think I ever outright said it in the read along or before, but I think you can still hear it if you pay attention, because quite often I say the book tells us or Gwen tells us, which is another problem. There's a whole lot of telling and not showing in this book. Even though it is so chunky, you would think that with so much space you have a whole lot of showing going on, but no. So if you cut a lot of the repetition, like Gwen telling you that she's dying over and over, and that Roa betrayed her over and over, you can invest those words into showing instead. Because if you cut all of the swearing, the unnecessary sex scenes and stuff, then I think you could have cut quite a chunk of this book. So just one example, if you wanted Gwen to still be a standoffish loner at the beginning. This was precisely why Gwen wasn't big on making friends in the workplace, and why she hadn't bothered to get to know anyone on the ship. It was also why she would soon be dying, alone. This is just outright telling you, it's like, yeah, she's not good at making friends, she has little interest in it, and she wants people to keep their distance. For showing, I think you could have put a scene in, like, somebody comes up to talk to her and ask her what her plans are, and she calls him by the wrong name, and the other person gets offended. It's like, we've been working next to each other for like 3 months and you still don't know who I am. And Gwen would be like, eh. You want to show that Gwen is a bit of a dick and a loner, then I think you could have quite easily put a scene together to do that instead of outright stating it like this. Okay, those are just some ideas on how to improve this book. And I feel like a couple of beta readers or critique partners should have mentioned at least some of these. Well, those are just my ideas. If you have ideas of your own, please let me know in the comments. How could we improve this book? Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be back next week with another video and maybe another read-along at some point. Leave a suggestion in the comments if you have one. Like and subscribe if you want to help this channel out. And thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!